Okay, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday. And as per usual, guys, if you have any questions as we're moving along, just let me know. I may not be able to see you because I'm showing this presentation mode at the moment, but you can always jump in and interrupt. So let me go ahead and jump into this week's solar news to give you the updates of what's happening at the beginning of 2023. That's exciting. JA Solar, this is part of announcements. There's a spate of announcements that are going on all the time now regarding domestic manufacturing of solar and solar products. This is largely due to the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in August, where there's a 10% bump for using domestic materials. So JA Solar announced they're going to be installing a 2 gigawatt production facility in Phoenix, Arizona. They're looking to invest about $60 million on this project and hope to employ about 600 people at that location. JA Solar is a Chinese company, one of the largest solar manufacturers in the world, and they were founded in 2005. And then another one of these domestic announcements is that Q-Cells has announced that they're going to be expanding their facilities near Dalton, Georgia. They're going to be investing $2.5 billion on creating basically a complete supply chain here in the United States. They currently have about 1.7 gigawatt of production facilities in Dalton, Georgia. They opened that facility in 2019. They're going to be expanding this to about 5.1 gigawatts and looking to add about 2,500 jobs down there in Georgia. But like I said, this is a little bit unique because they're looking to do the entire supply chain. We have seen people who are going to be assembling the panels here in the US, and we've had questions in the past of what does that mean? Is it truly a US-made panel if they're mining the silicon in China, making the ingots, cutting the wafers, making the cells, and then they just assemble it in the US? Well, Q-Cells is looking at doing the entire process, all the way from making the silicon ingots to slicing the wafers to creating the cells to assembling the panels, and that will all be done here in the US. This, again, is another of those domestic. In recent weeks and months, we've seen plants announcements in Georgia, California, New York, Indiana, Ohio. Ohio is actually one of the largest manufacturers of solar panels in the US. Alabama, Texas, Minnesota, Florida, Arizona, Washington, and South Carolina. So they're spreading it around a little bit. We should see this continuing as we move forward here, because there is quite an incentive to buy US products when you're installing these systems for commercial systems. BP has announced that they're building a 134 megawatt solar array in Fulton County, Ohio, which is just west of Toledo. It should be large enough to power about 20,000 homes, but this is being built as part of a power purchase agreement from Meta, which is Facebook's parent company. So Meta is going to be buying all the power from this facility. Construction's begun. There's a picture right over there. My hand, I can't find it. Yeah, over there. Everything's backwards. All right, of the site and what they're going to be doing. Plans are to further develop. This is BP, British Petroleum, so they're kind of going all in on solar. They're planning to further develop about 20 gigawatts of solar by 2025 and 50 gigawatts by 2030. And I believe this is just in the United States. All right, Jinko Solar has announced a new line of panels, and this sort of stays in line with the fact that panels are getting more efficient, but they're also getting much bigger. The Jinko panels, they've announced this part of their line they call Tiger Neo. Where they come up with this, I don't know. But it's a 54 cell panel that's 445 watts. It's actually 22.27% efficient. Then they also announced a 72 cell panel that's 615 watts. That's 23.23% efficient. And then they have a 78 cell panel, which is 635 watts, and that's about 22.72% efficient. Just part of that process where panels are getting more efficient and much, much bigger. Sonova has announced they're partnering with Solar Edge on the home battery system. And so their network of installers will have access to these, I assume, at preferred pricing and access. This is, of course, part of a DC coupled system. The battery bank that goes with a Solar Edge system is 9.7 kilowatt hours, just about 10 kilowatt hours. I love these pictures they do in marketing. I've got that next to my shoulder here. Shows two guys lifting it up on a wall. Well, these things weigh 275 pounds. So those guys are a lot stronger than I am, apparently. And so is that Molly bolt that's holding it to the wall. This will produce about 5 kilowatt hours of continuous power. It does retail for about $9,000, has about a 12-year warranty on the whole Solar Edge system. And then I thought this one was pretty cool. There's a Dutch company. They've announced they're taking pre-orders for their new Lightyear 2, which is going to begin production in late 2025. It's an electric vehicle. It has a 500-mile range between charges, retailing for about $40,000, I guess, if you can get it, in the US, the European Union, and the UK. But what's interesting, and we've discussed this a little bit in past programs, it has integrated solar cells in the hood and on the roof of the vehicle. And they're claiming that as you're driving the vehicle on a sunny day, it will actually add about 50 miles of range while you're driving. So that would kick it up to about 550. Obviously, if you just left it stand in the sun, if it's adding 50 miles of range, it would take about 10 days just using the solar panels to recharge it, the ones that are integrated in the vehicle. It has a 60 kilowatt hour battery that's part of it. They do say that they have about 21,000 pre-orders on this, largely from leasing companies and from ride-sharing companies like Uber, that kind of thing. This is their second production vehicle. Their Lightyear Zero, which was launched in June of last year, began production in November of 2022. So that's the news from the solar industry this week. So anybody have any comments on that? Anything from on the news? Yeah, Bob, you've got something?
What confuses me as they increase the watt output for the panels. Where do you get the controllers to deal with a 680 watt panel?
Yeah, I was thinking on that because clearly that would overpower any kind of power optimizer or microinverter, maybe not the optimizers. So a panel that size, I would assume, would be for a larger commercial installation, maybe even a utility scale installation where you've got large string inverters. I assume that's and also a ground mounted system where the module level electronics are not required as part of the system. So I don't know. Bill,
is that a more economical way of going? String inverters?
Yeah. Oh, you mean the larger? Yeah, for a larger system, like a ground mounted system, for sure, a large string inverter is going to be much more economical than something like a power optimizer system or a microinverter system. Yeah, when you get up into the 1 megawatt kind of range, something like microinverters just is not really going to make sense. But I'm assuming a situation like that, shading is not going to be an issue because you're going to have selected the site based on non-shading. It's going to be a ground mounted system. So rapid shutdown's not going to be an issue. So not really sure. Yeah, I don't know. Bill Dorsett, do you have experience with those larger panels? Do you have something like that? You're muted as well. So if you want to throw in.
No, we don't. We've stuck with panels that are in the range of 400 watts, 380 to 400. There is a company in a small town next to us who's using the twin panels and the twin microinverters on those. I'm not sure exactly who puts them out on, but he's using twin panels on and I think that Enphase had twin inverters for a while that would handle two panels, but then they dropped the line. So no, I don't have.
Yeah, I think a company, is it ABS, that has some that'll take even up to 4 panels in those microinverters. So something like that might make sense. I don't know. The advantage of having a larger panel like that is that basically the amount of time it takes to install for 680 watts is going to be very similar to the amount it's going to be for 400 watts. So when you start taking that out to scale, having 2 people put a panel on and connect 4 bolts and make a connection, it's going to be the same, but you're getting 50% more power out of that. So that's really where the value is. The downside is whenever these larger panels start to break the 50-pound limit that's put on by OSHA. I mean, OSHA says then 2 people are supposed to carry these things around. So I think 2 people are required to realistically handle pretty much any panel. So, especially if you're on a rooftop. So I don't know that that's such a big deal, but on these ground mounted systems, you need 2 people to carry something to meet OSHA requirements if it's more than 50 pounds. So any other questions on the news before I jump into some of the financing thing? All right, I'm going to jump into speaker mode here. All right. So I thought I would take this opportunity here to just talk a little bit about some of the incentive programs that are available out there. We have touched on this before, but things change and rules get updated and the like. And I'm getting a lot of questions about this. So I thought, well, let's just touch on it. So of course, the big incentive programs, there are a lot of local incentive programs. We've discussed the REX program in Illinois that prepays a certain number of years. I think it's, what is it, Bob, like 10 years or something like that, upfront for your REX. But the main incentive programs that we'll touch on is for residential. The big dog is the investment tax credit, and there's a 30% investment tax credit on all systems, residential, commercial, where whatever you're paying and the cost of your program or the cost of your system will include the cost of labor, unless it's your own labor. Of course, if you're installing it yourself, then your own labor doesn't count. So it's basically out-of-pocket costs, and you can't do that. I'll pay my brother-in-law who do his. He'll pay me. They get a little bit. They don't like that. So who knows? You may get, unless you're a high government official, you'll probably be audited. So some of the other things for the system, I did find that these for anything less than 5 megawatts, then they will include the cost of interconnection. Now, that's going to be important because we're finding oftentimes you've got to upgrade your service panel. You're going to have trenching for some of these to make the proper connection. And that can be a significant cost. So that's nice that can be included in under the tax credits. If you have to do improvements to the roof as part of the installation here, typically those are not going to be counted as part of your system because for tax credit purposes, unless for some reason by putting it on your roof, you've incurred incrementally higher costs than you would have had you just simply replaced your roof. So that's something that you could monitor. I'm not quite sure what situations that would arise, but if by putting solar on your roof, it costs you more to do the roof work than it would have otherwise, then that increased cost might qualify. You'll need to talk to your accountant. So now when you get into commercial systems, the federal tax credit also applies, But then there are some bumps, some add-ons. These are not something that qualifies with residential systems. But you can get a 10% additional tax credit if you use US made product. And I'll go a little bit deeper into each of these, so I'm not going to go too deep just now. There's a 10% low income area credit. So if you're installing it in a poverty region of sorts, you'll get another tax credit. If you're in what they define as an energy community, you'll get another 10%. And then there is the REAP grants, and these are through the USDA, and they've just increased the threshold there where you can get as much as a 40% grant on the install of your system for commercial. And then there's, of course, depreciation, and I'll touch on some of that. So let's look primarily, and again, as I'm talking here, if anybody has any question, just jump on in and interrupt, because I know you'll hold it till the end and then you'll forget what it was all about. So as far as what qualifies as domestically made product for that 10% bump in your tax credit, well, they're saying 100% of the steel or iron should be domestically manufactured. Now, I looked through some of the websites and the like. I couldn't find if aluminum is in there, but very likely, I would guess. But anyway, right now they're saying steel or iron. 40% of the remaining components must be US manufactured in order to qualify for this 10% additional tax credit. Now, what does that mean? Because it really is quite a complicated process to determine if it's domestically manufactured, all of the submaterials that are part of this. And so I started looking through to see if anybody's advertising, yes, this qualifies, because I really think we're going to have to rely on the manufacturers to let us know if their product has been pre-qualified. I don't find anybody yet. I just may not have been looking in the right spot, but I think that's something we're going to have to rely on the manufacturers. This goes up, the amount of domestic content goes up to 45% in 2025, goes to 50% in 2026, and 55% in 2027. So that's the domestic product bump. If you're putting it in a low income area, the threshold there is 50% of the households in that region must be at less than 200% of the poverty level. So what is the poverty level as of 2021? One person household was 12,880, and then it increases 2, 3, 4. So a 4-person household was 26,500. So the median income for a 4-person would, that area would have to be a little less than $50,000, $52,000, $53,000. So you can get that information from the census to find out if your county or if your area is considered low income. I think most of Appalachia would qualify in there. Speaking of Appalachia, this is the other 10% kicker if you're part of an energy community. I think of this as the Joe Manchin provision, where essentially, and this is based on census tracts, and census tracts are very oddly organized geographic regions, small in nature. For instance, in my county, I think we have about 10 of them. So if there has been a coal mine closed in your census tract where you're putting the array or an adjacent tract after December 31st, 1999, then it would qualify. If you're in a census tract where or adjacent to one, a power plant has been closed since December 31st, 2009, then it would qualify. If you're in a census tract where 0.017% of the population has historically been employed in fossil fuels, again, they're focused primarily on coal, but out west, I assume oil and the like would qualify, then that location would qualify as an energy community, or apparently if it's a brownfield site, a polluted site, that as so designated by the EPA. So all of those would then qualify you for an energy community 10% bump. Then that's from the Inflation Reduction Act. Those are all part of tax credits that you would get when you file your taxes. One other thing to point out is, as part of this act, in the past, if you were an organization that didn't pay taxes, a nonprofit entity or the like, then you would simply not qualify. Well, now you can actually receive a rebate or a refund from the federal government as a non-tax exempt, as a tax exempt entity. And I had made one other note here. Let me look for it. I think if you don't take all your credits, you've accumulated these credits, but you didn't need them this year. Well, the new law says you can go back 3 years. So if over the past 3 years, you've paid taxes, well, you can recapture some of those taxes by going back 3 years, or you can carry forward the balance of your credit for 22 years. So that's quite significant. I know we've had discussion in the past as to how long these credits could be rolled over. And to my knowledge, there wasn't a good place to get that kind of information. But the articles I was reading this time state specifically that the Inflation Reduction Act will tell you that if it started, if your project started in 2023, you can carry it forward for 22 years. If it started in 2022, you can only carry it forward for 20 years. So 20 years, still pretty significant. All right. Now, when we get into the USDA REAP grant money, this also received additional funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. And this is a grant program ideally aimed at businesses in rural communities, but also at agricultural businesses. They've raised the amount that they will fund up from 25% of the project cost up to 40% of the project cost. So already you're getting like a 60% tax credit, and now you're getting a 40% grant. Easily you could have the whole system paid for just in those if you qualified for all those tax credits. The amount that you can receive is up to $1 million for each project. These are geared towards businesses in communities with less than 50,000 people, so municipalities. I'm not sure. I think it's just cities. The county be considered rural, or any agricultural business that happens to. It can be anywhere. It could be in New York City, for all we know. If it's an agricultural business, still would qualify. They issue this funding. There are two application periods of time. The deadlines are March 31st and then October 31st. So you would apply up to that deadline. It's a grant application, but there are businesses out there or nonprofit organizations that will do the paperwork and for a fee. Some of them charge a fixed fee. Others will charge a percentage if the grant is awarded. And that's something that your client may look to do because they don't want to be bothered with all the governmental bureaucracy of that application. So the REAP grant is a substantial grant. I've been told they've received quadruple the funding that they had in past years. So it is it's a competitive process. So not everybody who applies may get the grant. But again, I've been told because the funding has vastly increased that the competition will be much less. So a much higher probability of receiving that grant. And then commercial systems, of course, are they can be depreciated. And that's another financial incentive that's out there. This is done when you do your taxes. They did have a bonus depreciation process where you could write off 100% of the project with no limitation as to how much the project costs. You could write it off in the first year. I was looking through, that was set to expire January 1st of this year of 2023. I looked, there was one article that said it had been extended through 2027, but I couldn't find anybody else who claimed that was the case. And I really felt like all these entities, somebody would be reporting it other than just this one. So take that with a grain of salt. Assuming it hasn't been extended, it's a phase down where in 2023, you can take 80% first year. You can take 24% in 2024 and so on and so forth. But, and of course, I'm not a tax expert, but it looks to me like still you could take what they call section 179 or 179, where you could write off up to $1 million on the process as an expense, which is effectively taking the deduction or in the first year as an expensed item. So those are the incentive programs, the main incentive programs. So anybody have any comments on that? Let me throw that open to the gallery. Yeah, Bob, you've got a comment?
Well, is there a place on the websites or anything going through this so that I can study it after? Because there was a lot of spoon feeding here.
Yep. Yeah, I got this information from a whole lot of different places and in a whole lot of accounting type jargon. So maybe the best thing, I'll be posting this video on the solar PV training.com website. So you can jump in there and just review it to your heart's content. That's probably the best. And just as a reminder, these videos have been approved, by ETA for 30 minutes of continuing education for your solar certification. So as soon as you finish viewing that video, it'll spit out a PDF certificate, and that goes directly to ETA as well. So for your renewal. So I think that's probably the best bet, Bob.
Yes, I've got 4 earned points out of 8
to get done.
So
Well, now
I'm
you're gonna
doing-
have to sit through 8 more videos, just to get up to what you need. So
What do I need?
didn't you say you need 8 hours a year or something like that, or is it 6 hours a year for continuing education? I think it's 6 hours. I think it's 24 hours over the 4-year period.
I default to you because I was thinking 4 hours.
Oh, no, I think it's 6.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions on the whole incentive program? To my way of thinking, right now we're in this weird situation where solar is the cheapest option, and there are all of these government incentives that are out there that are making it at the commercial level, especially, practically free, assuming you qualify for all these tax incentives. Assuming you're a profitable business, you're making it, such a no-brainer to go ahead and install the system, that I just have a feeling as soon as people begin to understand this, that there's going to be a massive rush of small to medium size commercial entities who are going to be wanting to go ahead and install solar. And when you take all these incentives together, it feels to me that the Biden administration specifically is looking at itself similarly historically to what the Eisenhower administration probably looked to itself for the transportation infrastructure. They've got a huge amount of money in the infrastructure bill that's geared towards completely revamping and upgrading the long haul distribution and transmission system of the grid. And now they've used this Inflation Reduction Act to incentivize the wholesale revision of local distributed energy systems. And they've got production tax credits that are out there for the utility scale systems. They've got the refunds going out to traditionally nonprofit utilities like munis and co-ops. So I think all of these things put together, we're going to see over the next decade a complete transformation of the U.S. energy system, in very large part paid by the U.S. federal government. So,
Jay, first Schubert, real quick.
Yeah.
Are solar community co-ops somehow considered businesses, or is that?
a solar community co-op, I would imagine they would be. You're talking about like community solar projects.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's just simply an investor who is selling off portions of the system to small owners, making it essentially a co-op. So I would anticipate that's a business venture that's qualifies for all of these. Certainly not a residential. Anybody else have any other comment? Nope, everybody's being quiet. I'll give you like one more go. Otherwise, we'll just call this meeting at an end. So, anybody? All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for joining in, and we'll see you next week. All right.
Thank you, Jay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.